Hello and welcome to Scale Stuff. In this week's video I'm going to be building the Italeri 1/24 scale Ford Transit Mark II. I wanted to build something normal and a white transit van certainly falls into that category. In the box you get black and white instructions, the main body of the van moulded in white plastic, a bag containing black, white and clear sprues for the smaller parts of the van, 4 rubber tyres and a decal sheet to make a British gas version of the van. A quick look at the sprues shows that this is going to be a fairly simple kit to build. Nothing major on the sprues is jumping out at me, just the standard old fine layer of flash that will need to be cleaned up. A nice touch with this kit is it comes with the option of right or left-handed drive. The main body of the van looks pretty clean. There's a big feed port in the roof and a little bit of flash, but this should be a simple task to sort out. This kit has aged fairly well, considering it was originally released in 1984. Anyway, onto the build. The instructions are asking me to add the wheels, but I want to paint the hubcaps up separately, so I'm going to skip adding them along with the steering linkage for now. So first thing I'm going to do is the undercarriage. This model has a simple fake engine base, but no engine bay or liftable bonnet. I'm taking a little bit of a gamble here, adding the spare wheel holder without the wheel, but I'm pretty sure that I'll be able to put the wheel in later. This model is going together pretty simply. There's just a little bit of flash on each part to sort out. Adding the front suspension is a little bit tricky, but once the pegs are in, it's easy to twist the suspension arm into position. The rear suspension is also a little fiddly to add, but nothing to lose sleep over. At this stage, I'm not adding the exhaust as that's going to be painted in silver along with the wheels later on. With the rear suspension in, the kit's asking me to build the doors, but again, as I've not pre-painted them yet, I'm skipping forward again. I feel like I'm missing half of the kit so far. Here I'm going to circle all the bits I've left off so I don't forget to add them on later. Now it's time to add the rear bed and gear stick. Nice and simple. I'm going to pre-paint this area with a base coat of rattle can black. In hindsight, this kit might have been easier to just pre-paint on the sprue at the start, but it is what it is. As always, I'm spraying this up off screen and outside to avoid fumigating myself. While I was adding the base coat to the main chassis, I also decided to hit the black sprue parts with a bit of matte black to make sure they had a base coat down ready for painting them later. With the base coat on, I went back to add the front axle to the van. These bits are all snapped together, but require a little bit more force than I'd like. They do move when done though. Now some more pre-painting. I'm getting out the Army Painter gunmetal and getting a coat of paint onto the exhaust. While I've got the metallic paint out, I'm going to give the undercarriage a light dry brush to give the undercarriage a little bit of detail. Putting the exhaust on later than the instructions ask you was fairly simple. It helps if you thread the front part of the exhaust set through the suspension, upside down, and then flip it over. I've realised now though that I've put the spare tyre holder on in the wrong way, so yeah, watch out for that if you're building one at home. It's an easy fix though, just going to have to leave it to dry for a while. With that dry, it's time for a bit more pre-painting. I'm giving the carpet area of the cab a quick few coats of Army Painter Dungeon Grey. With the base coat for the cab down, it's time to build the seats. Simple and easy, the seats go together well, but really do need a bit of a squeeze to get the seats' rear panels into place. With them done, I dry fit them to the base of the van and realise there's a few holes to fill here, so it's time to get the green stuff out. With the green stuff in and painted over, it's more pre-painting time. For this, I'm mixing up a few greys to get the seats and other internal fixtures painted. While looking at reference pictures to paint these parts, it seems that the interior detail on this kit is not the best. There's a fair few bits like seat belts and dashboard details that I think could have easily been included in this kit in this scale. Overall though, the detail and layout seems pretty true to life, and if you wanted to go to town on the cab, I think this would be a great base to build upon. Paints down, it's time to assemble this area a bit. The seats need quite a bit of a squeeze to get them into place. The dashboard's really simple to build. Again, I'm noticing more details the model should have for such a big scale. Where are the indicators and wiper levers? While I'm doing these last bits, I'm going to add the two small decals here before I start shading this area in a bit. Looking at the small steering wheel logo for a jeweler's loop, it does actually say Ford, which is nice. Decals on, it's time to add some details. While the shadows and grime are drying, I'm going to pre-paint all of the white parts white. Pointless as this seems, I just don't trust leaving them as just white plastic. As normal, it's time for a trip outside to spray these up. While the white paint's drying, I'm going to give the wheels a bit of attention. First thing to do is rough them up a bit with a light sand. The rubber on these tyres is quite soft and only needs a light sand. The first tyre I tried the sanding on, I overworked a bit. Wheels worn, I moved on to the hubcaps. These I'm colouring in with a metallic silver Sharpie. With the wheels done, I revisit the body. And as per usual, I've had some problems with the rattle can spray paint. I forgot that I base coated the bed in black earlier and it's caused a reaction. Oh well, never mind, we can work with it. I worked in the building industry for years as a labourer, or site monkey as we were known, and cleaning out other people's vans was one of my jobs. And these vans became a right state, or did at the place I worked at least. So I'm going to make it look like some of the messes I saw at work. Paint would spill on the mud, concrete would set in the backs, and then on top of that, the thing would rust. First thing I'm going to do is sand back some of the crinkling just to make it look a little less obvious. After that, I'm going to wash the whole thing in brown. This will find all the cracks in the paint and make it look like rust. Then it's time to add a bit of white to tie this mess together. White paint is always the main thing spilt in these vans, so it would make sense to add different whites to this mess. Also, I'm going to add a few other random colours to these paints, as there was always a bright feature spill in every van. I decided on blue for this van's feature spill. With that on, I'm adding some black, as this will mix in with the white while it's still wet and go grey to simulate all the concrete dust that ends up in these things. While I'm adding this mess to the bed, I'm also giving the inside and dividing panels a quick wash. The insides of the vans generally stay fairly clean, but later on I'm going to be adding wood panelling onto this to give it some more detail. Anyway, next up on the revisiting nightmares of past jobs, I'm adding some kitchen roll or wet wipes to the cab. You always got a good bin bag's worth of damp tissue from the cab of a works van. It mostly lived under the seats. For this I'm using loo roll, dipped in PVA, watered down with dirty water. Most of the time, anything on the bottom of a van would absorb what was ever was in the wet. A lot of the time, it became stuck to the base of the van as well. Lastly, floor mostly complete, I added the source of the mess, a roll of tissue. The source of the mess was normally somewhere in the van, crushed, soaked and kicked out of the way. With that done, I'm going to leave this horrible mess to dry. While the muck's drying, I'm adding the door interiors. These bits need a clamp to hold them into place. The bulldog clips here are likely going to damage the paintwork, but at this stage I've decided it's going to be done up as a works van, so every bug's a feature from here on out. Rolling with the punches, I decided if the doors are going to look chipped, fully commit to that, and I hit the whole model with a light sand while the paint was still a little bit tacky. I did this on the doors and the roof and the main body of the van. These raised areas and roughed up patches will take a nice wash later on and give me some texture to baste any rust around or weathering around. This whole video is basically winging it at this point onwards. With the main body now dry, it's time to get ready for interior panelling. Here I add the dividing bit, but forgot to paint the window trim, so I'm getting that done with a little bit of black paint. Then it's just a case of adding the dashboard. This practically drops into place. Those bits in, it's onto adding some wooden panels to the inside of the back of the van. For these I'm using really thin balsa wood and simple trial and error fitting them until I get the shape I want. Firstly, I do the doors as they're the easiest to do. Once I've got the balsa wood cut to a shape I like, I glue the panels in with a bit of super glue. I'm taking a risk here using super glue as there are clear parts in the dividing wall that might fog up, but we'll just have to see how we get on. With the wood panelling in, I give this area the classic filthy builder treatment with a black paint wash. All the vans at my old work always had mildew in the woodwork, so I'm representing that damp, never dried out properly wood look here. With that done, I'm just adding a few bits to the bed. All of the vans on site used to have two boards in the back for wheelbarrows, so I'm adding what's meant to represent a couple of cut down scaffold boards to the back. Along with something else that was in most of the builders' vans, bits of copper pipe. Once when cleaning out the vans, we found hundreds of pounds worth of copper bits taken from jobs in a van. The bloke in question was asked to explain, and yeah, we never saw him again. So yeah, it was a top quality establishment I used to work at. It's been closed for over 10 years now, so don't worry, they're not at large anymore. Anyway, bed done, it's time to add the upper cab to the lower cab. This is a bit tricky to do. It's hard to show, but it's best to start with the main body upside down with the doors in place as they drop into holes that hold them in later in the lower part of the body. Then work from back to front. Add glue and carefully put the pieces together, gluing and closing as you go to avoid a sticky mess. The door stage right at the end of the putting these two parts together is the trickiest bit to get right, but once it sort of falls into the right position, the doors are in solid and then it's done and you never have to think about doing it again. But with all them two pieces close together, I'm going to leave this bit to dry for a while until it's safe to properly handle. Top dry, it's time to add the bumpers. The front one goes on okay, or would do if I hadn't snapped the pins off. The rear bumpers though have too much peg and need to be shortened in order to fit. Now it's time to start the weathering. As you can see, I've done a bit already. I forgot to press record. All I've done here is add some watered down black and then rub off the excess, leaving it in the grooves made by the sandpaper earlier. I'm doing the same thing now using AK World War I khaki brown. I'm doing this in all the worst looking scratches to show a little bit of rust. With the rust, I'm going to drag the paint down in the direction that rainfall would gradually pull the rust, making sure to do this around the doors, as work van doors always get the brunt of wear and tear. With the rust on, I'm going to add a bit of green to the roof. No one ever sees or cleans the roofs of vans, and they often end up with a nice bit of algae living a life amongst the scratches. I'm only doing this lightly, as unless it's left for a long time, roof mould never really gets that bad. Next up, it's time to paint the window trim. Nice and simple, I'm just using Vallejo black for this. Trim in, it's time to add the windows. The windows are a tight fit. Had a bit of trouble here getting them into place and needed to trim a few of the tabs to get them to fit in properly. Unfortunately, even though I got the windshield in fine when dry fitting it, I cracked the clear plastic on my second attempt. Thankfully, in line with the rolling with the punches of this build, the crack line's really fine and fairly believable that it could have been a windscreen chip. So maybe a lorry kicked up a rock on the motorway. Or maybe this whole build's an exercise in denial and mental gymnastics. At this point, I honestly don't know. While trying to be precise with the windshield fit, I managed to scratch the windshield as well. But yeah, if you ever do this at home, some silver metal polish is your best bet. I'm not going to go to town on this scratch, but as you can see, a quick polish can act as a bit of damage control for any scratches on clear parts. Now it's just a case of adding the last little bits to the van. The headlights are a bit tricky to add. One tab needed to be trimmed off in order to get a good fit, but once these are in, all the other bits go on easily. I did have to enlarge all of the placement holds, as paint had made the fit a little bit tight. With these bits on though, that's the build, other than the wind mirrors, done. Now it's just a case of adding the decals before I do a final weather to the van. Lastly, using some watered down BS Dark Earth, I give the lower areas of the van a light wash to make it look a little bit dirty. And with that, I think I'm going to call it done. This is the finished model. I really enjoyed building this van. It was nice to make something normal for a change, and I think going with all the errors has given this van quite a bit of character. In conclusion, the Italeri 1/24 scale Ford Transit Mark II is a good kit. On the surface, it's a quick and simple kit to make, but when you get into the nitty-gritty of the model, it's actually a surprisingly involved build with lots of scope for customization. The kit only lets itself down in a few small ways. A few little extra details in the cab would have been nice, but when it came to the actual build, the main trouble I had throughout this construction was a few parts had an overly tight fit and needed to be trimmed back in order to get them to fit in. But this is a really quick and simple thing to fix and nothing to lose sleep over. The doors are also a little bit tricky to put in, but again with a slow and methodical approach, it's hardly even a noteworthy build hurdle. I picked up this kit for £24 second hand. It can be picked up brand new for around £30 to £35, and I think for the price, it's a good value for money for this highly customisable build. Anyway, that's my build and review of the Italeri 1/24th scale Ford Transit Mark II. As always, I hope you enjoyed the video. Until next time though, look after yourselves and have a good one. Goodbye.